Hello, everyone. It's Jen from Team Tandem, and I am here with Helen Fisher, the author of Joe Nuthin's Guide to Life. We're just going to chat about Helen's writing process, why she decided to write Joe, and a couple of other bits. Hello, Helen.
Hello, it's so nice to see you.
And you. So, Joe is a fantastic character. He is lovely. He's super big-hearted. He's really funny, even when he kind of doesn't intend to be. What came to you first, the story or the character?
Well, Joe was walking around in my head for 2 years before I wrote him. I actually had written a novel that I thought the publisher was going to take, and I started thinking about what my next book would be. And it was this young man started, and then he worked in a factory, and he had this thing that he was going to do where he wanted everybody to like him because that's the way his mum perceived him, and he wanted to just be kind to everybody, even somebody who might be quite mean to him. So yeah, he lived. But then they didn't take this book that I thought they were going to take, but I didn't write this story about Joe. He just lived there for a couple of years and walked around and did this now and then, waved at me.
Interesting. So his mum was always a key part of how he existed in your head as well, then, because in this book she's so much a part of who he is in guiding him, and I won't say molding him, but she really does create kind of his perception of himself as well. So she was always part of what
no,
you
she wasn't. No, I had him. I know in the book he doesn't actually work in a factory, but in my head he always worked in this factory, like a fairly routine, a job with lots and lots of routine and lots and lots of him. He loved the machines because they were sort of predictable and repetitive, and that really appealed to him. And so in this original version in my head, there was just this person at work that just for no apparent reason was not very nice to him. But no, all the things that he loves and all the things that he likes and little things that he's obsessed with, like epitaphs on gravestones and things like that, they were all there. But no, actually not his mum. Some of his friends were in there, but no, she only came onto the page when I started writing.
Interesting. And then once you did start writing, did his world kind of flesh out around him fairly easily?
Yeah, writing Joe Nuthin was a really unusual experience for me because I wrote it during a really, really dark and difficult time in my life.
Okay.
And so I don't quite know how he emerged as this lovable character. And I've written an article very recently on, where did Joe Nuthin come from and that sort of thing. And I've delved quite deep, and I have my own theories. But yeah, he existed first, and the kind of work that he works in a superstore in the novel now, but he existed, and then everything else just kind of came into existence around him.
I have to say, though, even though he is this incredibly lovely character, he is warm, he's squishy, you just want to be his friend, there is a lot of darkness in the book. I'm not going to give any spoilers, but particularly the big life event that happens early on, I was not prepared for or expecting that. I just read pardon? Sorry. So I think it does deal with a lot of darkness as well, doesn't it? It just doesn't feel that heavy because you are looking at it slightly from Joe's perspective, I suppose.
Yeah. I'm really interested that you say you didn't see that coming. So I'm going to be really careful not to give anything away.
Yeah.
But when I wrote the first draft of that book, I wanted the reader to be able to see what was always about to befall Joe without Joe knowing it. So that as the reader, you kind of went, Joe, look, this is about to happen, and us be able to see. So when I sent that first draft in, they said, no, we don't like that this is predictable. Can you change it so that we're in the dark as well?
Yeah.
And when I rewrote it, because I know what's going to happen as a writer, you feel like everything is predictable in everything you write because you know it so well, and you've read it 10 times, and you read it again and think, oh, I've read this 10 times, it's boring, it's predictable. But of course you don't know what it's going to be like for the person reading it the first time. So I'm really happy that you didn't see that coming.
Yeah, it completely took me by surprise. It really did. So Joe is kind of, well, not hinted, but it's kind of almost discussed through the books that Joe is possibly neurodivergent. Did you make a conscious decision not to ever name at any point and say this is what is going on with Joe?
Yeah, I made a very definite conscious decision not to say, to be specific about Joe's any diagnosis or anything like that. I do say in the book, I mean, he's clearly got OCD, but anything other than that, yeah, he's clearly neurodivergent, but very definitely not diagnosed. In fact, the American editor wanted me to say specifically what Joe was diagnosed with, but I said no to that. And I'm quite obedient, so I say yes to pretty much everything they asked me to do, but that I didn't want to do. I felt that it would not only be useful or helpful in the book, I actually felt that it might detract, that it might take us outside Joe's world to, because as you say, a lot of it is kept light because we see it slightly more from Joe's perspective, even though it's written in the third person. I think the way that I've written it as well, I've kept it fairly simple. It's almost, some of the writing feels like it would be the way Joe would speak. My son read a little bit of it for me once. I said, what do you think about this chapter? This is what I'm trying to do. And he actually said, is this a children's book? And I said, no, it's not. And he said, but anybody could read it, actually, anybody, any age, he felt. And I agree with that. So I think that yeah, now I can't remember what the question was. This happens to me all the time. Stop me, make some gesture, shut up.
I was kind of asking how you came to the decision not to name Joe's neurodivergence.
Yeah, I didn't think it would be helpful, and I thought it would take away from that sort of, and I don't know if there's any need. Do you think it would have been better if I had? Just out of curiosity, what do you think?
I think it's an interesting question. I think that Joe is enough of a big character that there is something in him that so many people will be able to identify with. I think as a neurodivergent person myself, we are always crying out for more representation in fiction, especially positive representation like Joe is. So I think it might have, in that sense, have been nice to name him. But I also don't think necessarily that it's necessary. I think there is so much that people can identify with, and I think that he is so clearly neurodivergent that I'm not sure, other than perhaps being able to market the book as this is about a person with, that it would have had much benefit.
Yeah, there's some other reasons why I didn't do it, and one of them was when I started writing, I knew what Joe was like, but I don't have anybody I know people who are neurodivergent, but they're not my children, not my siblings, nobody who's like really close to me. So when I started writing, I thought, well, I don't know, I just want Joe to be whoever he is,
and
we'll see at the end, we'll see how he turns out at the end. So at first it was more to do with me not knowing enough, and then later on, when I came to that decision, it was for the reasons that I said, that I didn't get it added to the book, but also such a lot of what Joe is, things that he says, things that he does, his little quirks and gestures, and the way that he thinks about such a lot of things came directly from myself and my children, conversations with them, things that we do, our little funny little games and secret codes and stuff like that, that it almost felt like cheating, because I was giving him a lot of our stuff and we're all neurotypical. So I'm quite fascinated by the fact that if you put certain characteristics onto certain characters, they look different. You know, they look different because they're on Joe than they did when they were on me or my children.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of humanizing though, isn't it? Because so often we read a character who has whatever complex medical stuff goes on, and it is very much like, I am writing a person with autism. Whereas the way you've written Joe, and actually the way you've experienced Joe, like, okay, so these characters might be this, but they've also come from here. That all of us are just people who've ended up with, for whatever reason, because we have care needs or because we want a diagnosis, with these kind of labels on us. So it's interesting to think that so many of those things is actually just being a person, isn't it?
Yeah.
So trying to think what I was going to ask next, Helen. Have you read any other characters in books or seen characters in films that have kind of inspired you to write the character of Joe?
Actually, Joe Nuthin's Guide to Life is definitely the sort of book I would like to read, because I would say that I loved all the Rosie Project books, and have you read those?
Yeah.
The main character, I think it's Don Tillman. He's
Mm-hmm.
autistic, isn't he? And
Yeah.
he's very clearly sort of shown as autistic. So I love that, and I loved Eleanor Oliphant is completely fine. Yeah. And I think I do like, I like the way plots work in stories, but I love it when there's a central character who carries everything. And I love it when they are perhaps somebody in life who ends up being marginalized.
Mm-hmm.
That really appeals to me. So I can't think of anything else off the top of my head, but those are my favorite kinds of books where you've got people, a person right at the center, with kind of neurodivergent characteristics.
Yeah, no, that's great. And did you know at the beginning of writing, and again, was it a conscious choice that it wasn't going to be, I say, a romance focused book? I mean, I think relationships are absolutely core to the book, aren't they? And how much people love Jo and how much Jo loves. But did you know that it wasn't going to be a standard, this book is about a person with a love interest?
Oh, that's such an interesting question, because no, I never for a second thought this is going to have any sort of romantic aspect to it, but I also didn't purposefully leave it out. I didn't, it never even crossed my mind. I think there's one part in the book where Jo asks his friend if she's his girlfriend or something, because he's not sure, because there's some stuff that's going on, and she very clearly and kindly says no, and that's all right with him because he's just after the information, really. But apart from that, I don't think there's any hint at it at all. And I always feel like it's a failing of mine that I don't feel like I can do romance very well. Although I am trying to write one. So and I don't know what it is that bothers me about it. It's just not something that comes to me naturally. That doesn't mean that I think with a lot of writing and a lot of authors, if it doesn't come naturally, it doesn't mean it can't be done. It's just, it's not what you kind of sit down to do. And with Jo, he was so organic. The story very much carried me along with it as much as I wrote it. And I know that sounds like such a cliche, but it really was like that. I think had I had a romance in it, I would have definitely had to really work to get that in. So I made no conscious effort to leave it out, but it was never going to happen if I didn't consciously put it in.
And I love that. I think we put so much focus on there being romance in books. I'm not much of a romance reader myself. And I do love books where the most important relationships can be friendships. So I don't know if you've read Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin.
No, but I'm just going to jot it down.
Absolutely read it. And it's kind of about how the great loves of your life sometimes are these platonic friendships, or they go through these phases of they grow with you, and what are they? And I think we don't have enough of that in books, just being in love with the people you are around, because Jo receives so much love and he gives so much love that you don't feel like, oh, he's missing a love interest.
No, there is definitely a lot of love in the book. And I think, in fact, the book's set over a fairly short period of time. So, if somebody was reading it and thinking, oh, I'd really like it if Jo met someone, I think, there's always future, there's future possibilities for people in the book, I suppose. But there's a hint of, actually there is a hint of romance in the book, but it's nothing to do with Jo. I think there's a couple of characters, there's somebody who fancies somebody in the book, but it is very much sidestepped. I don't know why, because I love romance in my own life. I just it's not something, I just think I won't do it justice. So
maybe we need a second book. Maybe we need a Jo Nuthin's Guide to Love.
Oh,
book two. I'll give you that one for free. So coming up,
can I just say, one of my favorite books ever is centers around this, just a friendship between two guys, and it's called Leonard and Hungry Paul. And I've got it up on the shelf. No, I can't see it, but it's so good, and it's just such a simple, brilliant book, but all about friendship, and I love it.
I think we need that. Friendship is so important and central to our lives, right? More books about friendship, definitely. So last question, Helen. There is the yellow book, isn't there, in Jo Nuthin's Guide to Life, with lots of tips and tricks for kind of how to get through life, the things that you need to know, what is one thing you wish was in a yellow book for you?
I actually wish that, so my daughter at the moment is 15, nearly 16.
Mine too.
Yeah, so it's that age where they're kind of, you know, I see how she's dealing with friendships or like a boyfriend or breakup and those kind of things. And I look at how she's dealing with stuff and I listen to my own advice when she says, you know, what should I do in this situation? Or what would, you know, and when I compare what I was like, I was so different to the way that she's there. I really admire how sort of strong she is. And like, even if she's upset, she's like, she knows what she wants to do. So I think, honestly, I mean, it would be romance advice. It would be really about how to, but I would have wanted it when I was younger. I would have wanted that kind of, oh God, this is really, really hard question to answer. But I think it would be on when things are difficult with certain relationships in your life, always it's that friendship thing again. It is, look at what's good and stick with that. Don't put up with, you know, bad behavior or being treated badly because you think that, just, you know, just have a little, you know, have some respect for yourself, move on, and everything, it will be fine. It will be fine. I know that sounds really wishy-washy, not very well.
But... And I feel like that is something that could be in the yellow book that Joe's mum might write. As part of our read along, actually, we're going to get people to help us compile our own yellow book. So I have to send you the tips.
Yeah,
as well.
that would be fantastic. I'd love to see that.
I have so many things in my life, and again, like, I don't know if it's because I'm a neurodivergent person or just a bit of a rubbish adult, but like so many little things, like all the time, like, you know, when things say of them that you can't freeze them, but really you can, and some people just know what you can freeze, or things say don't wash it, but really you can wash it, and some people just seem to know what you can wash. Like, it's these secret codes, isn't it, embedded into society. It's like, come on now, somebody just give us a yellow book with all of the real answers. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Helen. I'm going to say goodbye now, but thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure talking to you.